Today's show is brought to you by LootCrate.com. Save 10% on any new subscription by going to trylootcrate.com/armchair. Enter promo code BRIDGE10 to save 10%. Again, that's trylootcrate.com/armchair. Enter promo code BRIDGE10. What is going on, guys? All right, welcome to GoingFor2.com's Armchair Fantasy Sports Show presented by Talk Loud Radio. I'm your host, of course, Jeff Lambert. You can follow me on Twitter at JeffLambert77. You can also follow the show at Talk Loud Podcast. Subscribe to us, of course, on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music, and TuneIn Radio. Just search for Talk Loud Radio, all one word. You can also find us at TalkLoudRadio.com and streaming on the Going For 2 app. All right, guys, it is week 3 of the NFL. It is Friday night that we're recording this podcast. We're going to be doing the main slate tonight for FanDuel and DraftKings. And for that tonight, I brought along 2 guests. We're going to have a familiar face, a familiar voice. Gerson will be covering the FanDuel slates, and we'll have Tim Strobel covering DraftKings. Both of them, of course, are from the DFS Roundtable on Facebook, so search for DFS Roundtable. Join the Facebook group. Lots of good conversations going on in there, guys. All right, Gerson, Tim, how y'all doing tonight?
I'm doing good, Jeff. Ready to get started.
Definitely. Can't believe it's week 3 already. It seems like it's just been flying by.
Yeah, I completely agree, man.
All right, well,
can't believe we're already like 3 weeks in, man. It's crazy.
Definitely. I guess we'll go ahead and just jump right into the slate. First and foremost, I wanted to ask you both. I know, Tim, you're more of a DraftKings guy. Well, you're kind of forced to being a DraftKings guy being in Texas because they don't have FanDuel there. But as far as this week goes, have y'all had issues building lineups this week? I know, Tim, you were saying that you're having a hard time on DraftKings because they tightened the pricing up a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, DraftKings has been pretty sharp with pricing. Even week 1, I think that they were pretty sharp with pricing. And this week is no different. I mean, there's a lot of guys that they priced really competitively. And so there's not as many edges as there may have been in previous weeks, but we're still going to nail them.
Definitely. Gerson, what about you? You haven't have any issues with building lineups on FanDuel?
It's just this week is just like there's not like a lot of value on FanDuel. I mean, there is some, but mostly at the wide receiver position. But overall, I think this slate's very interesting. I don't think there's going to be higher ownership like the last couple of weeks, where one player is certainly owned this much. I think this week will just be more of a balance and I wouldn't say chalk, but like, more, anyone can do good,
Exactly.
You can't favor someone.
Exactly. I agree with you 100%. And I do, this is my first year really playing, heavy on DraftKings. I usually just played FanDuel, and I have a hard time on DraftKings with that flex position. I know everyone wants to have that flex position. They don't want, the kicker. But on FanDuel, it's kind of nice to have that kicker because you can put a cheap player in that position and then pay up everywhere else. But on DraftKings, you got to have a decent player in that flex spot, which makes it a little bit harder to build a lineup with a smaller salary cap. And like Tim said, they do a better job, I think, in their pricing as far as being competitive than FanDuel does. DraftKings seems to almost price their players based on the matchups, more so than just the algorithm that they run. I think DraftKings actually will change a guy's, price based on who they're playing, where I don't think FanDuel really does that. They just kind of go by previous history and run their little algorithm on it, and they just kind of leave it at that. So I think DraftKings does a better job of pricing that. All right.
I completely agree.
Let's go ahead and just jump right into quarterback here. We'll start with you, Gerson, on the FanDuel slate here. The top quarterbacks that we have as far as price are Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Matt Ryan, Drew Brees, Derek Carr. Are any of these guys this week worth paying up for, or are you looking elsewhere this week?
I'm looking. Well, you said like 4 quarterbacks, but I just think Roger and Tom Brady price is so high, and I don't think I'm really going to be paying up that high this week. This week I'm going more for like the lower price players. I just think it's a better fit for just overall how to build a roster. So if I'm targeting someone, I really like Derek Carr this week. I mean, they have a total 54 over-under versus the Redskins. I know he's playing on the road, but, I mean, Carr has a great completion percentage, too, and that offense is looking very nice and very good. I mean, against a defense like the Washington Redskins, which isn't very good at all, I think they're in the bottom 12 touchdown rate allowed. And I just think Carr is just barely touching his, I guess you can say he's trying to get into a tier 1 of quarterback ranking, and he's just barely touching it right now.
Definitely. Tim, what about over on DraftKings? Are any of these quarterbacks worth paying up for on DraftKings?
Yeah, in this spot, I think that the quarterbacks at the top are a little closer together in price than maybe the top guys are on the FanDuel slate. So I think that they're more in play. I definitely think Rodgers at home at 7,300 is in play. I love Matt Ryan on the road in Detroit at 7,100. Brady at home with a big spread. I don't know if I'm so much on that play. So if I'm going to be paying up, it's probably going to be Rodgers, Ryan, or as Gerson said, Derek Carr. I really like him on the road at Washington. I mean, outside of Norman, there's really nobody on that defense that scares you, so he's going to be able to light him up.
Definitely, and I'm actually on Rodgers as well on actually both sites. I think on those 4 quarterbacks, I kind of like Rodgers. I think they have a good running game, but they don't use it as much. They pass pretty much all the time, and then you've got basically without Cobb, you're going to have basically Ty Montgomery, Devontae Adams, and Jordy Nelson can get all the targets. So you can stack that game pretty good with Aaron Rodgers and be pretty comfortable that you're going to get the right guys. So I do like Aaron Rodgers in that top tier. Drew Brees, obviously on the road going to Carolina. We know how bad Drew Brees is on the road. I'm avoiding him at all costs. Tom Brady, if you look at his last 2 games against the Houston Texans, he hasn't actually been very good. I think he's averaging like 240 yards passing and only has 2 touchdowns. So I'm avoiding Tom Brady just because of his price point. I mean, he could go off at any time, don't get me wrong, but I'm not going to pay that much for him when he could have a potential down game against the Houston Texans as well because their defense is pretty good. All right, let's look down into the mid-tier here. I'm sorry, go ahead. Someone want to say something? Tim, is that you?
No, I want to say something about Aaron Rodgers. I mean, I do like Aaron Rodgers, but just the thing is there's too many question marks for me right now for him. One of them is, well, I know Brian Bulaga and David Bakhtiari are both out for week 3. And then Randall Cobb most likely doubtful for week 3. And then if Jordy Nelson is out, which, we never know, it's just we don't know with the injury situation. He's a game-time decision right now. Roger without Jordy Nelson averages 4 less fantasy points per game. And imagine that without Cobb also and 2 tackles, that could take a hinder in his, upside for that 9,300 price on FanDuel. 7,300 on DraftKings, pretty fair, but 9,300, that's a lot that's almost at least 15-20% of your salary cap.
Yeah, I agree. If Jordy Nelson's out, I'm probably looking elsewhere because I do like Nelson there. I think Aaron Rodgers and Nelson have that connection. And with Nelson there, that kind of spreads out the defense a little bit where the guy like Devontae Adams can get open. Ty Montgomery has running room, but you take Nelson out of that lineup, and it's a whole different ball game. All right, let's go.
I don't see a scenario where Jordy doesn't play on Sunday, but if he's out for any reason, I completely agree.
Yep, definitely. All right, this time we'll start over with the DraftKings. Looking at some of these mid-tier guys, you got Cam Newton going to New Orleans, or actually, they're at home versus New Orleans, which, that's always a good matchup with any quarterback. Phillip Rivers is at home with Kansas City. You got Russell Wilson with 0 offensive linemen, basically. Ben Roethlisberger going on the road. Matt Stafford and Jay Cutler kind of round out the sort of the mid-tier quarterbacks. Who do you like in this group here, Tim?
Well, there's 3 guys I really like. First guy I think we got to talk about is Cam Newton. He pretty much gets the best possible spot in that he gets the Saints at home. But he's been kind of limited lately. He hasn't looked like the same Cam this year. He hasn't been running as much, which was always a big part of his fantasy value. So even though I like this spot for Carolina and maybe interested in some of the Carolina skill position players, I don't know if this is a spot where I would trust Cam, especially in a cash lineup. I want some tournament exposure, of course, but, I wouldn't trust him in that spot. The three guys I'm really looking at here are Matthew Stafford, Kirk Cousins, and Ben Roethlisberger. I know traditionally we don't like to play Big Ben on the road, so he's probably third in that spot. But I think both Stafford and Kirk Cousins are at home in potential shootout games against teams that don't have particularly good defenses and specifically secondaries. So I think either one of those games could be, very high scoring, and they're priced very well in comparison to some of the higher up guys.
Definitely agree with you on that as well. I think Matt Stafford, at least on FanDuel, maybe not so much DraftKings, but on FanDuel, I think from what I've seen in all my Facebook groups, he might be the chalk quarterback for your cash lineups. Gerson, who do you like in this mid-tier of quarterbacks for FanDuel?
Well, me and Tim are in the same boat, basically. I like what he said about Cam Newton. I just don't have that much trust in a Cam Newton right now. I mean, you're paying $8,100 on FanDuel, $6,600 on DraftKings, and he's only thrown for 399 yards and 2 touchdown passes, and he's coming off that shoulder injury. Kind of worries me a little bit, and to pay that much and trust him, I just can't. But I love Matthew Stafford this week against the Falcons defense, and I understand Desmond Trufant's pretty good cornerback, but Vic Beasley is now out, and he had 15 sacks last season. Stafford is he's a top 5 efficient quarterback for sure. He's averaging about 0.61 fantasy points per dropback, and he's thrown 6 touchdowns in 2 games with 70%. So, I mean, that tells you that Jim Bob Cooter guy just throws the ball. And,
yeah,
I just love it. I mean, Stafford, he has no fear, man. He just launches that ball. He has that kind of same game of Brett Favre. So I like his upside. Kirk Cousins, we're going back to that 54 over-under game, Sunday Night Football. That could be a shootout. I mean, the Raiders defense, I still think it sucks. I don't care what they've done the first 2 games. And this is coming from a true Raiders fan right here. Everybody knows how I love the Raiders, but I don't believe that defense is that good. I mean, 25.5 point spread for them. It just kind of tells me, I hate this because I'll admit when I'm wrong. Last week, all you guys that were listeners, I am so sorry for Terrell Pryor, but this is a Terrell Pryor revenge game, I guess you can say, but I hate saying that same narrative. But, I mean, Terrell Pryor, Jamison Crowder, and if Jordan Reed's healthy, that could be a back-and-forth battle. But other than that, those are the other quarterbacks I'm looking at.
Nice. And now on FanDuel, they actually kind of snuck another guy into the mid-tier here. I want you to get your thoughts on him as well. And, Tim, you can chime in. But Carson Wentz, what's your thought on him? He's 7.7 on FanDuel going. He's at home versus the Giants, who haven't looked so great offensively or defensively so far this season. You like Carson Wentz at all? Gerson?
Me or Tim?
That was for you.
Yeah, I like. Oh, sorry. Well, I like him because he's ranked 4th in the league in passing yard at 640 and had the 9th best touchdown rate at 4.7. And the Giants are just second to worst in DVOA right now. And if Janoris Jenkins is out, I mean, that defense is kind of. I mean, I understand Landon Collins good, but it's just I consider Landon Collins more like a strong safety, linebacker safety,
Right.
But not more of a more. He's a good cover safety. Don't get me wrong, but if Jenkins out, that defense is horrible, and we know right now that the Giants' offense is struggling. So I like Carson Wentz at 7,700. That's a pretty good. I think that's a high GPP leverage play. I mean, if you pivot to him, and if Jenkins out, you can put Alshon Jeffrey as a stack with him.
Definitely. Now he's much cheaper on DraftKings here. He's actually priced below Winston, Mariota, and Cousins. He's 5.9 on DraftKings. What's your thoughts on Wentz on the DraftKings site, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like him as much as the 6,100, 6,200 guys, but I think that he's very well priced for his matchup. Like Gerson said, he's priced as if Janoris Jenkins will play. If he doesn't play, I definitely think it's an upgrade for them. I don't think he's a lock if Jenkins doesn't play, but I think he's in contention with those other few guys. So if we do get that information, And, like Gerson said, you want to have some leverage in GPPs. Yeah, I can see the Carson Wentz play. Definitely.
All right, let's move down into some of these bottom tier quarterbacks now. Is there anybody down here that we're going to pay, bottom dollar for? I've seen Deshaun Kaiser's name thrown out there going up against Indianapolis. You got people calling for the Andy Dalton bounce back game going to Green Bay. You got Brissett, who had a game the last time out, but now his offense a little bit better going. He's at he's at home versus the Browns. Gerson, we'll go to you first on FanDuel. Any of these quarterbacks down here at the bottom of the barrel, being in any of your lineups this weekend?
I'm telling everybody, don't play Jay Cutler. I don't care what anybody tells you, just don't play Jay Cutler. I don't like him this week. I saw him throw a Hail Mary pass, which anybody can do in a backyard flag football game. Just throw a Hail Mary to the freaking middle of the field, and he threw it to the sideline. I'm like, how do you not do that? But I really do like Jacoby Brissett, and I just think his price is very reasonable for the defense he's playing, along with but I want to make sure I'm correct, because Tim, what is he on DraftKings? Cause
let's see. Jay Cutler, he's 6,100. Yeah, same price as like Cousins and stuff.
No, Brissett.
Brissett's 48 on DraftKings.
Yeah, he's 4,800. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and he targeted Jack Doyle like 8 times, and I think this is a game that we can take advantage of him. I really like his price, and it's more of a risky, and a lot of people are going for Deshaun Kaiser, and I understand that. I like Deshaun Kaiser, but if I'm going one quarterback where I'm going to put like all-in GPP play, it's going to be Andy Dalton. Nobody's on him, and I still don't believe that the secondary of the Packers are good. Like, I don't know. I mean, apparently they had one good week, and everybody still thinks they're okay. He's not as bad as people think. He's really not. And they fired their offensive coordinator. And let me check here. I had a note for him. The new offensive coordinator, the 9th heaviest offensive pass efficiency when they were running plays for them, and when he was a head coach. And I think that's going to be a pretty good advantage that we can have for some people that don't know who the offensive coordinator is. And at 5,100 on DraftKings and 6,800 on FanDuel, and there's going to be a stack that we're going to talk about later on with him, but of course everybody knows it. If you don't know it, then you're in for a treat. But I think it's going to be a great play, and a lot of people are going to fear, he sucked the first 2 games, but we all know if nobody's on them and we get Andy Dalton and he dropped 27 points for 6,800, that's going to take you up to the leaderboard.
Definitely. Tim, what are your thoughts on some of these bottom quarterbacks here?
Yeah, I mean, I like Gerson's call on Andy Dalton. If I'm going to be doing a, AJ Green, GPP, and then run it back with a Packers player, then yeah, I can definitely see that play. But if I'm paying down, especially on DraftKings, I am going with Deshaun Kaiser. I just think that the Indianapolis defense is just so bad. The Cleveland's projected to win this game on the road. That says something right there. He's got some running ability, so I think he's got kind of a built-in floor with his legs. I like him, especially if we're going to go with, probably the cheapest stack on the week. I guess Brissett and Doyle would technically be a little cheaper, but Kaiser and Higgins, which we're going to talk about later, is one of those starting stacks that I look at and can just stack every other spot on the board, and that definitely makes it intriguing.
Definitely. And Gerson, you kind of stole my thunder, man, because I'm all over Andy Dalton this week in GPPs. I actually have that lineup you're talking about with AJ Green, Dalton stack, and then I got a Packers receiver. I think I have Devontae Adams in that lineup, so I'm doing some correlation there as well. But I think he has a bounce back, game. I think that the firing of the offensive coordinator is going to be big. I think the team's going to want to come out and show that they still got something. They're still a playoff team. I think Dalton shows well. I don't think they win this game, but I think they put up enough points and enough offensive firepower that they actually have a pretty good DFS weekend. So yeah, I'm with you on the Dalton call. I'm also on Kaiser as well on DraftKings as well. I think that Colts defense is terrible. Kaiser hasn't looked, like a rookie. I mean, he's had a couple hits and misses here and there, but overall, I think he's looked pretty good. I think going up against the Colts, I think he should be fine there as well. At that price, you can't really pass it up. So I'm with both of you on those two calls. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next position here. We'll move on to the running back position. So we have two elite guys, at least as far as price point goes, and then it kind of goes into the more of a mid tier, I think, and that's the elite guys are Le'Veon Bell, Kareem Hunt. I guess on FanDuel you got a couple more. You got Devontae Freeman in the 8,000 range, Jay Ajayi in the 8,000 range as well. Gerson, going to you first. Are any of these running backs worth paying up for this week?
Okay. Le'Veon Bell, you have to go to him. I can't tell you how much of my bankroll he has crippled, but Le'Veon Bell, he's still one of the best running backs in the league. I know he has 119 yards on 37 carries, averaging 3.2 yards per carry, but you got to have faith, man. You got to have faith in this game. You can't just hold grudges, and I don't see him. I mean, he's 8,800. I mean, can you remember the last time you got that price for him? I mean, on DraftKings, he is a little bit overpriced in my opinion, but he's still a normal workhorse. He got 31 touches, last week. Played 92% of his team snap. I mean, week one he was really rusty. Last week, he just played a very good defense in Minnesota Vikings. I think, was it the Vikings he played? He played the Vikings, right?
Last week?
Yeah, you're right. Go ahead.
Yeah. Played the Minnesota Vikings. They're a pretty good run defense. I mean, underrated run defense, actually. And this week, I'm not worried about his matchup. I mean, it's just they're on the road. I understand that. People fear that when Ben Roethlisberger is on the road, that the offense sucks. But really, it's at Chicago. Chicago is one of the worst defense overall. I mean, if Jaquez Rodgers, sexy pick, yeah, but Jaquez Rodgers can run on them. I think Le'Veon Bell can run on them, and he's also projected my highest total point this week. So I like Le'Veon Bell for the high price dollar.
All right, what about over on DraftKings, Tim? Who do you like at these high price guys? Anybody?
Yeah, I agree with Gerson. I think that we're a rare opportunity. I think I heard the stat earlier that it was November of 2015, the last time Le'Veon Bell was this cheap on DraftKings. It's really going to be tough to ever get him at this price. But I still don't think, I agree with Gerson a little bit, it's still a little bit higher than I'd like to be to put him in my cash games. I definitely am going to have a ton of tournament exposure because they absolutely lean on him on the road. Chicago's, run defense is pretty good, but he's Le'Veon Bell. He finds ways to get yards. So I don't really like Kareem Hunt in this matchup. So if I am going to pay up over that 8K range, it's going to be for Le'Veon Bell. I expect that I'll probably have 20%, maybe 25% tournament exposure on him this weekend.
I agree with you on that. I think that he's more of a tournament play than he is a cash game play. I mean, usually Le'Veon Bell's a cash game guy, but I think with what we've seen so far this year, with him holding out, he still doesn't have his legs underneath him yet. He's, in week 3 now. He is going to Chicago, and I think the stat that I've seen on the Steelers is that Big Ben always has lower numbers on the road, but Le'Veon Bell has better numbers on the road, so that could be a little bit more of the game plan where they know that Big Ben is a struggle on the road, so they get the ball to Bell a lot more. So they could imply that game plan against the Chicago Bears and just kind of feed Bell. I can see that definitely being a tournament play as well. Over on FanDuel, I think I'm with Gerson as well. I mean, that price is just too cheap. I mean, I know it's $100 less than DraftKings, and you got a bigger salary cap on FanDuel, so you really can't beat that price. Kareem Hunt, I'm with you, Tim. I don't really like Kareem Hunt too much. I have yet to play him in my lineup. I just think that eventually he'll fall back to earth. I think he fell back to earth a little bit last week, and then he broke out a couple big runs at the end of the game or in the third quarter. So I think eventually he falls back, and paying that much for a guy that's only got 2 games under his belt is a bit much for me, but I'm with y'all both as well. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the middle tier here. Some of the guys that stand out here, Jay Ajayi, who got a huge workload last week. Ty Montgomery's in this middle tier. CJ Anderson. Mike Gillislee, I think, still kind of falls in that mid-tier. He has a touchdown upside. This time I'll start over on DraftKings. Tim, what do you think of some of these plays in the mid-tier?
Well, I think the chalk at running back this week, especially in cash games, is going to be Jay Ajayi. I mean, like you said, his workload is massive. He's going against the Jets. It's pretty much one of the best spots that you could hope for, even on the road. I usually don't like to play road running backs, but they're favored by 6. Jets team is bad. I don't think that there's really any question he's going to be highly owned. I like Melvin Gordon as well, though not as much. Like I said, I like home running backs, but they are the underdog in the matchup against Kansas City. Kansas City has a good run defense, and fairly good run defense, and he's not as involved in the passing game as I like on DraftKings, so I'm kind of out on him there. I think that a leverage spot here is going to be LaShawn McCoy. I think after what Denver did the other day to Ezekiel Elliott and the Cowboys defense, nobody's really going to be looking at McCoy here. He's down at 7K. He is at home. Denver is favored in this game, but if he gets his normal workload, I could absolutely see a game where, he kind of breaks out and does pretty well. You attack Denver on the ground, and I think that he may be in a spot here where we may be able to get him under 10% owned in tournaments. And whenever you get that kind of leverage, I want some of that.
Definitely. Gerson, what about over on FanDuel? Who are you liking this mid-tier?
Oh, I agree 100% with Tim, that's for sure. I like Jay Ajayi. I'm pretty high on him. I think if you're on FanDuel, one of the more popular GPP or cash game, because nobody's going to want to pay up for Le'Veon Bell, but like I said, in GPP, I'll be paying up for Le'Veon Bell. Ty Montgomery and Jay Ajayi is a great combo. I like Ty Montgomery. I mean, his price did increase a little bit, but when I say a little bit, it's basically a little bit. 6,900 on FanDuel, but on DraftKings, he increased quite a bit, actually. I think, Tim, about $2,000 more? Almost.
It was 1,100, 5,800 to 6,900.
Wow.
Okay, yeah. So it's pretty high. But on FanDuel, I'm still playing him. Just 5.5 targets per game, 88% of the snap. The Bengals are just – I don't think the Bengals' defense is great. And that Packers with Randall Cobb being doubtful and Jordy Nelson, if he's out – I mean, I think Jordy Nelson will play. I agree with Tim on that, but I think Randall Cobb was basically out. I mean, that's time money right there, That's
yeah, I completely agree with you, G. I think Ty's in a great spot here.
Yeah, it's just everybody's gonna be on him though, so don't expect low ownership on him because we saw what he did last week on national TV. People are gonna be like, oh, well, he's gonna do great again, But I like Jay Ajayi, but I know you guys don't like Kareem Hunt, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you do, Tim, but just a lot of people I just have that rookie. I don't know, anti-rookie campaign. I don't know. They just don't like playing rookies. But we got to remember, I mean, the Kansas City Chiefs offensive line is actually pretty good. And while he did have only 65% of the snaps week one, it did increase pretty much quite a bit last week. Shaquille West saw a dip of his 21% snap go down. I mean, from his 35 to 21%. And Hunt snap should start getting closer to 80, 75%. And if he does that, he gets what he does. I mean, in the second half of last week's game, and I was watching that game, and then the red zone, they kept on updating. Kansas City's in the red zone and whatnot, and they concentrated on Kareem Hunt getting involved in the game. So I like Kareem Hunt this week at 8,300. And maybe not on DraftKings, though, because that's way too high of a price for a guy in that kind of situation. But on FanDuel, I think he kind of had like last week it was Devontae Freeman, if you remember correctly. He was priced 8,100. And I think he can be last week Devontae Freeman.
Definitely, yeah. I'm on Ajayi and Montgomery in my cash lineup. I actually have I'm sure you both know, you both voted on it, but I have that weekly chalk check where you basically go on and you vote for your top plays. And I think Jay Ajayi and Ty Montgomery are the two most voted on running backs. So the cash game play is probably those two guys as a combo. So definitely agree with y'all there. Moving down into sorry, go ahead, Tim.
No, that's what I was going to say. I agree with you. From what I can tell, those are going to be the chalk running backs on DraftKings for sure. I think, as always, there are some opportunities here for some other guys in that same range that you can pivot to if you want to get some leverage. But, Green Bay favorite at home. It's tough not to like tie in that spot too.
Definitely. All right, we'll move down to sort of the third tier because it's not really at the bottom of the pack yet. But the third tier here, we got Christian McCaffrey, who's been somewhat of a disappointment so far in his first 2 games, but he gets the juicy matchup with the Saints. You got Marshawn Lynch in that high-scoring Redskins game. We got Jacquizz Rodgers, who was Gerson's, I'm going to call it the sexy pick of the week. He had Jacquizz Rodgers last week. He called him out on the podcast, had a good game. Then we have Isaiah Crowell, who's Gerson's man crush in the preseason. Hasn't quite yet broken out this season yet, but I think he's in a good spot going against the Colts. So starting on FanDuel here, Gerson, are any of these third-tier running backs interest you?
Why you gotta break my heart like that, Jeff? about Crowell, man. You just gotta call me out in public, huh?
Hey, if Mike Evans was struggling, you'd be doing it to me too. But Mike Evans is still a beast.
Hey, you know what? One day I will. I'm just kidding. I think a lot of people are gonna. It's just value running backs have not been working out as well. It's like, well. I mean, shit. If what's his name? Kareem Hunt was on the main slate week 1, then yeah, that would have been awesome. But last week was kind of tough on value running backs. I mean, if you had C.J. Anderson, I applaud you because I did see him, but I didn't play him as much as I wanted to. But this week, it's just those mid-tiers that we mentioned, like Aguirre, Ty Montgomery, and whatnot, they were pretty good price. But I think Amir. Whoa, that's on Monday night. Whoa.
No, he's on the slate.
Am I looking at his price?
He's on the slate.
No, he's on the slate, yeah.
Okay, I was going to say, Amir Abdullah, I mean, people are starting to get like, oh, well, he only gets, this much percentage of his touches. Theoretically, still his touches. But at Abdullah's price, given his matchup, the salary seems just about right. And I think he can be a very good cheap play. I think on DraftKings he's 4,700. On FanDuel he's 6,100 if I'm correct. But I like him in that high over and under game against the Falcons. With Vic Beasley being out, I don't think Amir Abdullah has anybody that can cover him because Vic Beasley is not a bad, he can cover pretty well into those safeties. But I think Amir Abdullah can be kind of like a sneaky play at his value. So. I mean, I'm not going to have too many low price guys. I mean, a lot of people, just because I'm telling you right now, if for some reason Rob Kelly misses Sunday, which right now they're saying he's going to play, but you never know, he could warm up and not feel comfortable, with that rib injury. And Samaje Perine against the Oakland Raiders, who are not a very good run defense, in my opinion, he could be a great value. But I think Christian McCaffrey, I'm going to have to hold off. I mean, that Cam Newton, I understand he's playing the Saints, but I just can't trust Christian McCaffrey yet. I mean, he's 6,200 on FanDuel, 4,700 on DraftKings. On DraftKings, he's playable, I believe. But the Saints defense do rank 31st overall. And if you want to play him, you can go ahead. But me, in a GPP, I'm not going to be too much exposure on him.
All right, let's move over to DraftKings. Who do you like in this third tier here, Tim?
Yeah, well, Gerson definitely made some good points there. I definitely think in the 5 to 7K range, if you take Ty Montgomery out at the top, the next guy that I really like is Christian McCaffrey. Again, I think he's more of a tournament play, but in PPR scoring on DraftKings, I think you have to consider him with against the Saints defense. So far, we've seen, the thing about him is you have to keep in mind that Jonathan Stewart's going to be there, but I think, like I said, in tournaments, you want to have some exposure to him. Another guy I really like in this spot is Mike Gillislee. Again, like I said, I love running backs at home that are up by large point totals. They're favored by 14 over Houston. Houston this year, the way to beat them has been on the ground. And, in that kind of LeGarrette Blount role from last year, he's already had a couple of, I think 3 touchdowns on the year. So, I definitely want some of Mike Gillislee in this spot. And then another guy, it obviously depends on the injury to DeMarco Murray. But at 5,300, I really like Derrick Henry. It is against Seattle, but they are at home and they are favored. Seattle is not the same Seattle that they were in the past. I think you can run on this team. And at 5,300 with the aggressive pricing this week, I think he may be in a good spot if Murray is confirmed out.
Well, you stole my thunder. I thought I was going to make it all the way through without you mentioning Derrick Henry. He's actually my guy there. I think if you look at the two games that Seattle's played, I mean, they had the week one matchup where Ty Montgomery didn't have an amazing game, but he had a pretty good game, 54 yards rushing. I believe he had somewhere in the 40 or 50 yards receiving as well. And then in week two, Carlos Hyde just went nuts on him. They had like 15 carries for 125 yards. So if Derrick Henry gets the lion's share of the carries, or hopefully maybe even DeMarco Murray's out completely, where he's going to have to get the lion's share of the carries, the Titans want to run the ball. Seattle has been unable to stop the run at this point. I love me some Derrick Henry at that price point, so I think he will definitely be in a lot of my lineups. Another guy that I also like, I think Gerson mentioned him earlier, just sort of in passing, but getting down to the bottom there, I do like Theo Riddick as well. I think this game will be a shootout. I think Detroit's going to have to pass the ball to keep up with the Falcons' offense, and I think Riddick actually catches a lot of balls out of the backfield, may even be second on the team in targets behind Golden Tate. So I think I like Theo Riddick as well. I know he's a little bit cheaper than what we were looking at, but I just kind of mentioned him because Gerson had mentioned Abdullah as well. So those are my two guys down here at the very bottom. Is there anybody else y'all wanted to mention? Tim, we'll start over you with DraftKings. Is there anybody else that's really cheap down here that you want to mention before we move on to the receivers?
No, there's. Well, I did want to go ahead and mention Crowell. I know in DraftKings, it's PPR scoring. You tend to favor the pass-catching running backs, but I think he's in a really good spot here. So I definitely would want some Crowell exposure. And one thing you mentioned is whether we play Stafford or Tate or Riddick or Abdullah, DraftKings specifically tends to release their prices and not factor in the Monday slate and a lot of their price movements on the week. And so I think this is an opportunity for us to get exposure to Detroit at prices that may have been maybe a little bit higher had they played on Sunday as opposed to playing on Monday night.
Wow, interesting. Gerson, what about you? Is there anybody that we missed down here in this bottom barrel of running backs you wanted to mention? Is there any Chris Thompson or anything that you want to mention down here at the bottom?
I do like that Derrick Henry call. I mean, if Derrick Henry starts and DeMarco Murray is out, he's going to be very highly owned for me. I think his price, $6,300 on FanDuel, is a bargain for a workhorse like him. I mean, he got like 18 carries last week. I think 18 or 19, one of the two. But and the Titans, they're really struggling on, like, I don't know. I think Marcus Mariota's the one struggling, but overall their offense is just they're built to run the ball, and you're not really going to beat the Seattle Seahawks by passing very many times. But they are. It's just. Derrick Henry's a great call by Tim, and I agree with him. I mean, if there was one guy, I was on him until the news came out earlier today that Sam Bradford was out. I like Dalvin Cook at 6,500, but with Sam Bradford being out, I think Vegas is going to have that down, like, I don't know. They're still going to be a favorite, and that's the thing. He's at home, so I think I always favor running backs that are at home. And so if he could be a very good cheap mid-tier play because with Sam Bradford out, people are going to be like, oh, that offense is going to suck. And by the way, I hate you, Sam Bradford, because you didn't play last week, and I was really high on Diggs and Julian, and you just ruined my whole morning. I think it just ruined my whole morning. But Dalvin Cook, I would look at him. So yeah.
All right, yeah, and the other guy.
Hey, can I make 3 quick notes?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, so first of all, I just looked it up. The Vikings are 2.5-point underdogs at home. I do like Chris Thompson again this week. I think it was an excellent call by you last week, but I still think he's in play again this week. And number 3, I can't believe I missed Marshawn Lynch when we were going over mid-tier plays. A lot of people were really big on Marshawn Lynch last week, and I was not. I figured if they got up big, they would pull him out of the game. They are not projected to get up big in this game. And I can absolutely see Beast Mode having one of those Beast Mode games in this spot against Washington.
Tim, once again, stealing my thunder. I was going to mention Chris Thompson again because his price didn't really go up that much. At least on FanDuel it didn't. I think he was 50 5,400 last week. He's now 5,600. Rob Kelly's still a little banged up. He may not, could not even finish his game possibly, and Chris Thompson can get the load again. But either way, I think there's going to be a shootout. I think that he's the passing down back. If the Redskins are playing catch up, Chris Thompson will definitely be in there. And that price point, I liked him, last week before he had that big game. And I think this week he might be a little bit higher owned because people are chasing points. But I think Chris Thompson's still in a good spot here. All right. There's nothing else we want to mention at running back. We'll take a quick commercial break. And then when we come back, we'll do receivers, tight ends, and defense. Y'all ready to do that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Do you need advice for your fantasy football team? How about your DraftKings or FanDuel lineup? GoingFor2.com has you covered. GoingFor2.com has exclusive content from some of the best fantasy writers in the industry, whose credentials include Bleacher Report, Fantasy Pros, and Fantasy Life. From advice columns to player ranks, GoingFor2.com has it all. Sign up for our newsletter to have all of our content sent to your inbox. Start winning today. Visit GoingFor2.com because no one remembers the extra point.
As we enter, come never take it on the biggest adventure.
Must be dementia that you ever thought you could touch our credentials. What's the initials?
QB Jam Rock, the lyrical official. Send out the order, laws and the rituals.
Burn candles, say prayers, paint murals. It is truth, we big news, we hood heroes.
For us the anchor, we come to bank.
All right, guys, welcome back. All right, we just went through all the quarterbacks and running backs on the FanDuel and DraftKings slate. Now we're looking at what I call the money position. That's the receiver. Of course, you get 3 of those on FanDuel, and you could potentially have 4 of them on DraftKings. We'll start on FanDuel, Gerson, with you. Of course, Julio Jones is the top price. Antonio Brown, Odell Beckham, and Mike Evans and Jordy Nelson are probably your top tier. Of these guys here, is there anybody you want to pay up for this week?
I'm going all in on Antonio Brown this week. I think Antonio Brown, I know a lot of people are worried about Chicago cover 2 defense, who has traditionally, basically eliminated the number 1 option. I mean, yeah, Mike Evans got a touchdown last week. I'll give you some props. But before that, they've shut down wide receivers like Julio Jones and among others. But Martavis Bryant, they have to respect him, and that'll keep the safety pretty, honest, and they won't be just pressuring Brown the whole time. And I know he'll be lower owned, I believe, because he's on the road, and usually people think that what's his name, Big Ben struggles. And I understand I mentioned Le'Veon Bell, but you gotta, when you build your GPP roster or cash game roster, you have to pick, you have to rotate them out. Don't be starting them together in this scenario. I don't think this is an what is it called, onslaught for Steelers.
Onslaught, yeah.
For top price, I like Antonio Brown as a GPP, and I think he'll hit value. I really do. I know his price is pretty high, but I just think for $9,000, I think he can do it. But I know that sounded pretty cheesy. I think he can do it, but he's my highest projected wide receiver, and it just Martavis Bryant's presence there is really going to open up a lot for him, I believe, in this game.
I need a sounder for the background. Just like, you can do it. That'll be our little sounder in the background.
You can do it.
All right, Tim, moving to receiver on DraftKings. Who do we like here at the top? It's basically the same guys over here. I think AJ Green sneaks into that top tier as well over on DraftKings.
Yeah, we'll get into AJ here in a minute because I know Gerson has some feelings on that one. But I also agree with him, whether it's deciding between 2 quarterbacks or 2 running backs or 2 guys that are on the same team, we often have to make kind of those kind of decisions where we either say we're going to go higher or lower on this guy, or we're going to split the exposure to the 2 guys. In this situation, I really am probably going to be heavier on Antonio Brown than I am going to be Le'Veon Bell. I agree with Gerson. I think that the defense they play is more conducive to shutting down wide receivers that aren't quite built the way that, Antonio Brown is and play the kind of game that he does. So I really like him in this spot. It's hard not to like a guy that's projected for, 11 plus targets. So I like him. Julio was obviously very popular last week. I think that game got out of hand, but he had something like, 18 points and they stopped throwing to him. So in a game that I expect to be a lot more competitive, I think he's certainly in play. I mean, some people are saying that they're worried about the coverage of Darius Slay on him, and I understand that to some extent, but he's still Julio. He's still going to get his points, and I think I still would, as Gerson said, have Antonio Brown with the higher raw score, so I would take him with the savings over Antonio Brown on DraftKings, but I think that I want exposure to both these guys here.
Yeah, I'm with you on Brown. It kind of baffles me that Brown is not the highest priced guy because, I mean, Julio Jones hasn't done a whole lot to this point in the season. Brown had that huge week one. He wasn't great last week, but he had a huge week one. So I don't really know why Julio Jones is priced higher. Maybe it's the matchup. But I actually have a stat that I wrote in my Fantasy Pros article because I have a weekly column that comes out. It's the DraftKings Fade article. And basically I pick guys that I'm fading this week. And Julio Jones made my list basically because of his price tag and the fact that he's not getting a ton of targets. I mean, he's the highest priced receiver on DraftKings and on FanDuel, and these are lists of the receivers that have more targets than him so far this year. Jarvis Landry, who's only played one game, has 15 targets. Mohamed Sanu, his teammate, has 15, who has more than Julio Jones, who has 14. Marquise Lee for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and Martellus Bennett has 17 targets. So I'm a little nervous with that number of targets over 2 games. I know it's Julio Jones. I know he can go off at any time, and he's definitely a tournament play for me. But if I'm looking for a cash game or a safer play, I think I'm looking elsewhere than Julio Jones just because of his price point. Gerson, what do you think of that? I know you like Julio Jones, but what do you think of those stats I just spit out? You think you still want to have Julio in your lineup?
I'm not going to have too much high exposure to Julio. He can be slotted with I think, what's his name? Slate or
Slay.
Something with...
Yeah, Darius Slay,
Darius Slay. And Dave mentioned one other thing I want to throw in there is that this offensive coordinator, Sarkisian, he said that he was going to get Julio involved in the red zone. I mean, he's only gotten targeted in the red zone one time, so that worries me quite a bit. And so it's just, like I said, this week is probably one of the toughest weeks so far, even though it's only been 3 weeks. But to kind of like pick out your stud wide receivers because Mike Evans is in a tough spot against what's his name, Xavier Road, Julio Jones versus Slay, and then what was the other tough spot I saw for myself? I can't remember the other one, but anyway, back to Julio Jones. I think I'll be limited on him, but everything Jeff just said, that's right on, man.
All right, let's move into the mid-tier here. Of course, we got Crabtree in the mid-tier, but he's actually I think the highest as far as fantasy points right now. Is the number 1 receiver in fantasy right now overall. Of course, he had a huge game last week. Got Amari Cooper in there in that mid-tier. DeAndre Hopkins, who I think right now leads the league in targets. Alshon Jeffrey's in there. Brandon Cooks, I don't know why he's still priced this high. He's been terrible the first couple of weeks, but he's still up here in this mid-tier. We'll go on DraftKings first, actually. Tim, what do you think of these guys in this mid-tier?
Yeah, I mean, I like a lot of guys in this spot. I think that there's probably I'm not going to have as much exposure, I think, to guys like probably Brandon Cooks or Mike Evans, like you said, just due to the spots that they're in. I like Crabtree. I definitely want some exposure there. He's actually priced up, like you said, being the number 1, currently. He's priced up over Amari Cooper, so I also like Cooper here. I think this might be a spot for him to get back in the game. But I think my favorite play kind of in this 7,000 range is going to be Keenan Allen. His price obviously came up quite a bit last week. I think he was $5,800. He's up to $7,200, but he's at home. You want to attack Kansas City through the air. He's projected to get, 10 targets or so again. So in that 7,000 range on DraftKings, I love Keenan Allen.
All right, going over to FanDuel. Who you got, Gerson? Who you like over here?
I want to talk about Tim's call on Keenan Allen. I do like that call. Terrence Mitchell, who's tied for second in the league with targets allowed 19, and Philip Gaines, who they both allowed about 7.5 receptions, 135 yards, and a touchdown per game in the first 2 weeks. So I really like his call on Keenan Allen. Obviously, if you don't know, the pick of the week on FanDuel is A.J. Green. I don't care what anybody says. if they tell you whatnot, just play A.J. Green. They fired the offensive coordinators, Zampese. Ken Zampese, I don't know how to say his last name. But A.J. Green complained that he wasn't getting the ball enough, and A.J. Green's a pretty humbled wide receiver. Like, he's not a diva like Odell Beckham. I mean, when was the last time you heard A.J. Green complain about something?
That's right.
This week?
Not me. Well, yeah, this week, and then it gets your attention.
I would too.
Pretty well, right? Yeah.
No, I agree with you. I don't play FanDuel. A.J. Green is the stone cold lock of the week on FanDuel.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
His price is the lowest. His price is the lowest it's been since Week 3, 2012.
Wow.
And that Packer defense allows 66% of the catches and 87% of the yards against wide receivers. So Green is a play for me in basically FanDuel cash games automatically. GPP, I'll have probably 40 to 50% exposure if I do like 150 rosters in a tournament.
Yeah, I'm with you both on there. I think I have both A.J. Green and Keenan Allen in my cash lineup currently. Keenan Allen, someone asked me on Facebook when I posted that I like Keenan Allen, that he was worried about Marcus Peters being on him. I don't think he's going to be on him. I think Keenan Allen, they go 3 wide, is going to be on the inside in the slot, which means he'll draw the defense of Daniels. So I think Keenan Allen's good there. And then just going back to his season last year, I know he only played half a game, but that half a game was against this same team. And in about a quarter and a half, he had 6 receptions for 63 yards already. Then, of course, he blew out his knee and couldn't finish the game. But at that pace, he would have finished with like 12 catches and 120 yards. So I definitely like Keenan Allen here. I think he's in a good spot. A.J. Green also, I already told you earlier, I stacked Andy Dalton with A.J. Green in my tournament lineups. So I definitely like him as well. DeAndre Hopkins. I mentioned he leads the league in targets. Unfortunately, it hasn't amounted to too much fantasy value yet. I just don't think those targets are very quality targets. So if you're just looking at targets, you think, oh, wow, he's got 13 in week 1 and 16 in week 2. But it's hard to trust right now with the quarterback position there, that I just don't think I'm going to go with Hopkins being this expensive. He was cheaper maybe, but I think I'm avoiding Hopkins at this point. I do like Crabtree and Cooper as well. I think I've got Crabtree in my cash lineup on FanDuel. So I also like Crabtree. I think he's their touchdown guy. He's their guy when they get into the red zone. They're looking for him, pretty much every time. So yeah, I'm with you all on all of those calls there. As we move down here into the sort of third tier of receiver, a couple guys that stand out to me. Jarvis Landry, as I mentioned before, had 15 targets in week 1. As long as he plays, he could be a good play. Devontae Adams, I think earlier we were talking in our group chat, the two of you, and you had the splits for when Cobb was out, and I think Devontae Adams had a humongous jump from when Cobb was in and when Cobb is out. So Adams could be good here. We got Brandon Marshall, who's just been terrible. Kelvin Benjamin's been terrible. We got Martavis Bryant down here. Gerson, we'll go to you first on FanDuel. Are any of these guys down here that you like?
Well, are you talking about value right now, or we're just talking like a cheaper?
Probably like a third tier. It's not quite the value yet. I think we're in the third tier, like the 6,800, 6,700 on FanDuel.
Oh, okay. Because it's just if we were going straight down to value, I had a couple of different options. But I think if I had to go down to that tier, Devontae Adams is going to be my lock and stone. I mean, and that's the thing, Devontae Adams purely relies on the Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb. I mean, if Randall Cobb's going to be out, I still like Devontae Adams. We saw that split early on. He's also a good red zone possession receiver. I mean, Tim watches the Green Bay Packers more than anybody I know. It's pretty cool because me and Tim are going to watch a Cowboys game in the Cowboys versus Green Bay, and that's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm traveling out there to Texas to visit him. But
nice.
Devontae Adams at 6,800 versus Cincinnati. While Cincinnati is a funnel defense against wide receivers, I think Aaron Rodgers, just being Aaron Rodgers, he can get that thing to Devontae Adams. I like Adam quite a bit. So he probably, that's probably besides A.J. Green being 7,500, I mean, yeah. And I also like to call on DeAndre Hopkins. He's 7,500 too. But I mean, 6,800 for Devontae Adams, high over-under game for Green Bay. I think that's a pretty good play.
All right. What about over on DraftKings, Tim? What's your third-tier receivers you like here?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the analysis so far. I think two guys kind of at the top end of this range a little bit that I want to make sure we talk about. You mentioned Kelvin Benjamin. He has not been good this year, but he does pretty much get the best possible spot here. With Greg Olsen out, I do think he has a really good chance of getting at least one touchdown. So depending on the yardage and the receptions here, he can make a really good tournament play. And then on the other side of that game, Michael Thomas. I don't think that I'm hearing hardly anybody talk about him because, Drew Brees is notoriously bad on the road, but they're going to be behind. They're going to have to throw. So I want some tournament exposure to both of those guys. In that little lower range, I agree with you 100%. Most targeted receiver in the league. DeAndre Hopkins has to be in consideration in your tournament games. I think that Bill Belichick traditionally tries to shut down their number one option. So I think that they're probably going to get a lot of coverage his way. But I think I'd still want some exposure. Another guy that I want some exposure to is Tyreek Hill. I think that he kind of let us down last week in a good spot, and so the exposure won't be as high on him. But again, I think that you can, he plays a lot all over the field. He plays a lot out of the slot. They find ways to get him out the ball. So I'm not as worried about the coverage on the other side. Gerson mentioned it earlier. Terrell Pryor is in a really good spot here. Another guy that's let us down throughout the year, but gets a really good matchup here at home. But in general, I don't know how many of these guys here in the middle I'm going to have exposure to in my cash games. I think this is one of those weeks, like Gerson, kind of alluded to a minute ago, where you might be looking at what we call a stars and scrubs kind of week.
Definitely. All right, let's go ahead and look at some of these value receivers. We'll start over on FanDuel, Gerson. I know you said you had a couple guys you wanted to point out here. I know a couple of them will probably be the chalk ones that we all know, but we'll go ahead and mention them anyway. Go ahead and give me your values on FanDuel.
I just wanted to go back on the mid-tier just real quick. Sorry about that. Two other guys I'm looking at is Martavis Bryant. Like I said earlier on, that the Browns played that over, basically covered that number one wide receiver with the safety. And if they choose to do that, Martavis Bryant's going to have a hell of a day because there's no one on that secondary that can stop him one-on-one. And I also like Crabtree because he'll be covered by, what's his name? He won't be covered by Josh Norman. Josh Norman will be on Amari Cooper. So if he's by himself, Crabtree can have another big game, and we know what happens when Crabtree has those big games. So, yeah. But back to value receivers. I actually want to throw this to Tim because I know he's going to mention this guy. He's probably more valuable on DraftKings than he is on FanDuel. I'm pretty sure you're going to mention him. If not, then I'll mention him.
And who is that?
Who are we talking about?
Richard Higgins.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think he will be the most popular value play of the week. I don't think in terms of raw percentage he'll be as high as guys like maybe Jay Ajayi or Jack Doyle, but I definitely think one of the highest owned players on the slate will be Richard Higgins, absolutely.
Yeah, I think he's going to avoid Vontae Davis if Vontae Davis returns. And Higgins just primarily in the slot, and Deshaun Kaiser has struggled with accuracy, but he throws that pass straight to the hot route. So I think Higgins is going to be a quite popular play. I mean, he's so cheap on FanDuel. I believe he's 5,100 if I'm correct, Jeff. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah, I think he's 5,100. I think he's 41 on DraftKings, I believe.
Oh, yeah, 5,100 on FanDuel. I mean, like I said, this week is kind of more of a, you want to fit your stud, and that's the best part. I mean, A.J. Green's a stud, and he's 7,500. So if you have Richard Higgins at 5,100 and you have Antonio Brown, I think that's a pretty good three combo wide receiver for FanDuel. But overall, I like Richard Higgins this week, and people don't know who he is, but he's actually a pretty good wide receiver. He got called up from the practice squad, and this is the Browns we're talking about. Who else are they going to throw to? I mean, they got that tight end, Yoki, and then they got, what's his name, Kenny Britt, who just basically robbed them of their money and said, oh, I'm only going to go half. I'm like, dude, he's been half-assing the whole season, I swear.
He has.
But
oh, yeah.
I like him. I like him a value receiver. And Jeff did mention this guy earlier on, Mohamed Sanu. He's only 11 players have a higher target share than Mohamed Sanu right now. And one of them, of course, who has one more target than him is Julio Jones. But Mohamed Sanu in that matchup is very interesting to me because he has a favorable matchup. And facing Quandre Diggs, who has the 10th highest target rate among corners through 2 weeks, I like Mohamed Sanu as a low-value wide receiver. But it just depends how you want to build your rosters. But like I said, you have to really be very, very careful this week on wide receivers because I honestly believe the position that's going to win all the money is going to be whatever wide receivers you land on.
Definitely. All right, Tim. So we talked about Higgins a little bit. Anybody else down here in this cheap range that you want to talk about?
Yeah, definitely. But before we do, I don't know if this is a hot take, but I do not think Josh Norman will shadow Amari Cooper this week. I think this is going to be one of those situations, like you said, where they see Crabtree on one side and Cooper on the other, and they decide to play sides. So my hot take on the week is that Josh Norman is not going to shadow, and they're going to play a side. So in the bargain range, though, you mentioned Higgins, you mentioned Sanu. Those are two guys that I'm very high on this week. A couple other guys, I like Jamison Crowder, especially if Reed doesn't go. I like him in this spot, even if Reed does go. I mentioned Greg Olsen being out earlier, so another guy that I think will be popular, but I think for good reason, is Devin Funchess. He hasn't really showed a whole lot, but like I said, he's in kind of that perfect spot. Another guy I think will also be popular, but for good reason, is Jermaine Kearse. He seems to be Josh McCown's go-to number one receiver so far this season, and obviously they're going to be playing from behind against Miami. So I think that Jermaine Kearse is going to get a good number of targets. So if you're looking to pay down and you don't you want to play Rashard Higgins, or you want to pair Rashard Higgins with somebody else so you can really pay up to the Brown guys and stuff like that, I think Kearse, Sanu, Funchess, there are a couple of solid options in this range.
Definitely, I like Funchess as well. I think people have a bad taste in their mouth because they expected him to be more than what he actually is. But I think with Kelvin Benjamin on the other side, without Greg Olsen, I think he becomes that number 2 target. He actually was second in targets last week to only Kelvin Benjamin. He had 7 targets, caught 4 of them for 68 yards. He is a bigger receiver too, so he could be somewhat of a red zone threat. He's cheaper even than Higgins on DraftKings. He's, I believe, let's see, where is he? He's 4,200 on DraftKings. I believe he's 48 on FanDuel. Pretty cheap guy. I think he's more of a tournament play, but he does, go up against the Saints, who are just horrible. If he gets 7 targets against the Saints, he could have 100 yards and 2 touchdowns for all I know. They're that bad. So definitely like some Funchess. Obviously, Higgins is probably going to be a pretty chalky value guy. You mentioned the other guys that I like as well. So, yeah, I definitely agree with you on all your value plays. I think you're going to probably just take one value play this week, and you want to pay up everywhere else because I think some of them are very risky. There's not any sort of lock it in. This guy's going to be definitely good this week. So I think I'm with you both. I also like Crowder as well on both FanDuel and DraftKings. I think Crowder, has that rapport with Kirk Cousins. They haven't had this year yet so far, but I think that they in this shootout, I think Kirk Cousins is going to go to what he knows best, and I think that's Jamison Crowder. So I think he definitely has a good game this week as well. All right, moving on to tight end. We got.
Hold on, before we move on, I want to mention 2 guys if I could.
Sure.
All right, so one guy I didn't mention when I was talking about that kind of 4,000 range is Ted Ginn. It's kind of his return to Carolina game. I'm always a fan of hashtag Narrative Street. So I think that I want some exposure to Ted Ginn in this spot. I mean, obviously, I don't want a lot of exposure, but I think it'd be silly not to. And one other thing we've mentioned quite a few times so far that Randall Cobb is likely to be out. I think that they'll give Jordy Nelson some more time in the slot, but I think that the biggest uptick, other than Devontae Adams, will be for Geronimo Allison. So if you're looking for a minimum price $3K punt on DraftKings, I think that it's worth looking at a shot at Geronimo Allison.
What was that for, Gerson?
I agree with Tim 100%. If Randall Cobb is out, Geronimo Allison's going to be such a good play on DraftKings, and that's why I was like, oh, how did I forget about him? But, of course, Tim is the DraftKings guy, so he obviously knows more than I do on DraftKings. But it just started – it's Roger, he just somehow always throws that touch. I swear, Roger is the highest quarterback that throws that touchdown to the most randomest players.
Yeah, I agree.
Am I the only one that feels that way?
I agree.
But,
No, not at all.
It was Allison, and then that I can't pronounce his name. It was like Abertububudi. Started with an A, and it was like very long, and then there's like just random wide receivers. If he's gonna throw any 3 touchdown random game, it's got to be Allison, man.
Definitely.
But I'm not projecting he's going to throw 3 touchdowns then. So please, nobody just put them in just because that's a 3 touchdown for Allison. I agree. I agree with Tim 100%. Allison, he could be a good play, a great play on DraftKings. He's only 3,000, you said?
Yeah.
3,000 min price, yes, sir.
Min price, yep.
Holy smoke! Especially this week with DraftKings being so hard to fit a damn roster. I wouldn't be amazed if Allison becomes kind of like a chalk value play at 3,000.
Yep, I can see it too.
I wanted my lineup just because of his name. I mean, this guy's first name is Geronimo. Like, how can you not love that? You know what I mean?
Completely agree.
Yeah.
All right, let's go on to tight end now. The first thing I see when I go over to tight end on FanDuel is I see a bunch of questionable tags and IR and everything else at this top tier. We got Gronk with the groin injury. We got Reed with the chest injury. We got Graham with the ankle injury. We got Olsen, of course, on IR. Eifert's already been ruled out. So a lot of these guys, pretty much are limited to what we have left. Are any of these top tier guys, which is basically, Gronk, who if he plays, Kelsey's still here, Zach Ertz, Delaney Walker. Gerson, we'll go to you first.
Well, I want to start out the tight end position by congratulating Robert Gronkowski on his 69th touchdown of his career. If we know the guy's a big fan of that number. But overall, I think the shock player is going to be Zach Ertz. I mean, he projected very high on my most projected points this week. He has the second most target among tight ends on the season. He's facing the Giants defense, who allows the 6th most PPR to the tight end position. And like I said, if Janoris Jenkins out, Landon Collins is going to be pretty busy covering those over-the-top wide receivers. And I just think Zach Ertz could be a great play. I mean, obviously, Alshon Jeffrey is going to demand more attention if Janoris Jenkins is out. And Zach Ertz, we're kind of seeing that he's just kind of gets so many targets, and Carson Wentz just targets him over and over. And I know last week, if you watched the Red Zone, you saw Zach Ertz get that tip pass from, I think it was Marcus Cooper or something.
Yeah,
like
off his hand and caught it in the air. Yeah, I thought he was going to score.
Yeah. Dude, I was like on my couch, and next thing I know, it's like, oh my goodness, go. And then he didn't get that touchdown, but obviously we know he has a great hand. So I like Zach Ertz as a chalk call, basically.
Yeah, I'm all over Zach Ertz. I think I've had him in my lineups literally every week so far this season. He's just a target monster. He gets all the volume, especially when Jordan Matthews left. I was like all over Ertz, which makes me happy. I've been sticking by this guy in my Dynasty League, just waiting for him to finally break out. And I think this might be the season where he actually starts strong and ends strong, whereas last year I think he started kind of soft and ended strong. But I think he's definitely the chalk play this week. Looking over on DraftKings, who you got in the DraftKings lineup over there, Tim? Anybody different than Ertz?
No, but I do want to mention that, as you mentioned a couple of times in the podcast so far, pricing on DraftKings is very tight. Normally, I would not recommend going too tight end, but I think this week may be one where we see more people going to tight ends both in cash and in their tournament lineups. As they mentioned, Zach Ertz is 5,000 on DraftKings. When you have Kelsey at 6,000, Gronk at 6,800. Compared to some of the wide receivers, he's got a pretty good projection against. He's very relatively, well priced. So I like Ertz. I like him even more if Jenkins plays, because I think he's going to get even more targets that way. So I think that Zach Ertz will be chalk, but it's going to be really hard for him to be very high owned, because I think there's a couple of lower priced tight ends that are also going to be very popular on the week.
Definitely. It's funny you mentioned the whole 2 tight end thing because I think both of my writers, I have a cash game DraftKings writer and a FanDuel cash game writer, and I asked both of them for their lineups, and just to kind of see what they're thinking. And the DraftKings guy actually put in his article that he's stacking Zach Ertz with one of those low-tier tight ends, Jack Doyle. And then I was talking to my FanDuel guy, and I was just kind of like, what's your DraftKings lineup look like? And he showed me his DraftKings cash lineup, and he had exactly the same thing. He had Zach Ertz stacked with Jack Doyle. So that seems to be a popular play. So I definitely could see that happening as well. I was kind of like, at first, but then the more I thought about it, I was like, okay, I can understand it, because it's a cheap spot you can fill there in that flex position and still get some good value out of it. So, yeah, I can see that happening as well.
Yeah, I think that combo will be very popular this weekend.
All right, Gerson, let's move down into the mid of the tight ends, which pretty much you got a couple guys and then you just fall off a cliff. But we got Martellus Bennett, who I'd mentioned has 17 targets. Hasn't done much with those targets just yet, but he's getting the targets at least. With Cobb out, he might get a few more his way. Kobe Fleener's been a popular play, but, in that game against Carolina, I don't know how good he's going to be. Dwayne Allen still priced in this mid-tier, though he hasn't done too much. Hunter Henry's in this mid-tier as well. Any of these guys here that you like?
It's just it's like what Tim just said. People are either they're really targeting Jack Doyle. I mean, got targeted 8 times, I believe, by what's his name, Brissett, and Brissett kind of new to the offense. He's kind of like getting in sync with his receivers and whatnot. And I swear to God, T.Y. Hilton has to be the hardest wide receiver to get in sync with. So he's going to be targeting Jack Doyle quite a bit. And if we know one thing, Cleveland Browns are the worst against tight end. It's just the last couple years, every year, it's either the Oakland Raiders or the Cleveland Browns. Week 1, Jesse James. Week 2, who was it last week that did really good against them? I know. Hold on. Who they play last week? I don't know who they played last week, but they did good against them too. Cleveland just allowed a lot of touchdowns and points to Jack Doyle. So I like Jack Doyle's. I'm not going to, like I said, for tight end for me, I either pay up at mid-tier or go down to value. Jeff knows me. I don't pay up for tight end. I just try to look for the mid-tier play, and I think Jack Doyle at that mid-tier play on FanDuel is the play for me.
All right. Definitely agree there. Let's go ahead and just cover up all the tight ends here. Tim, we'll go to you next. Are there any other tight ends you like besides Doyle on DraftKings?
Yeah, I like Delaney Walker. I think that Mariota always kind of leans on him. I don't think that it's a bad spot. Seattle's, a tough defense, like I said earlier, but I think that they can get some volume to him in that spot. Another guy that I think is going to be a popular pivot off of Jack Doyle, you can save $500, and he's in a very high-scoring game, is going to be Jared Cook. He's gotten, I think it's like 5.5 targets so far on average this season. So not quite as many as Doyle, but obviously I think he has, in my opinion, a better shot at a touchdown. So if you want to pivot off of Jack Doyle and the fact in the chalk, I think that Jared Cook's in a really good spot. And then one other guy I want to mention, I said earlier about how they haven't really increased the prices for people that played on Monday night. One guy we saw get a little bit more volume on Monday was Eric Ebron. So if you're looking for another one of those low 3,000 guys to either pivot off Jack Doyle or combine with Jack Doyle, if you really want to go stars and scrubs on DraftKings, Eric Ebron and Jared Cook are 2 options.
Definitely like all of those calls as well. I think tight end has actually got a couple options, quite a bit of options down here at the bottom. Another guy I just wanted to mention too real quick that we hadn't talked about just yet is Charles Clay. He had in the last game, he only had a few targets, but he actually got hurt. But in that first game, he had 9 targets. He's going up against Denver, Denver just gave up 10 catches to Jason Witten. So if Clay gets any kind of volume, I think in that Denver, I think that's the way you kind of beat Denver is underneath. And Clay's a better athlete at this point in his career than Witten is. So I think if they're going to target Clay the way they have in that first game, I think that he can definitely be a cheap sort of low-owned tight end for both FanDuel and DraftKings as well. So I just wanted to mention him real quick.
I like that call.
All right, and let's see if there's anything else in the tight end position that we want to talk about. Gerson, anybody else you wanted to mention in the tight end position?
No, like you've been saying, Tim stole my thunder or my lightning, but I like Jared Cook. I mean, he's the rated a 3-point favorite against Washington. Bottom 5 defense for his tight end, and Cook is actually a good tight end. I mean, a lot of people. Well, he sucked with the Rams because they sucked they didn't have a quarterback to throw to him. But Derek Carr, he had 13 red zone attempts this year, and that's not going to change in this game of 54 over and under. And if Jared Cook can get that one touchdown at his price, where he's at 5,200, I mean, I wouldn't be amazed if Cook has a 15-point game just by getting 80 yards and a touchdown. And for 5,200, that's median value right there. I mean, I know I just mentioned Jack Doyle. He's 5,300, but like I said, you're kind of like, I don't like to have a big player pool when it comes to tight end. I think if you have 3 or 4 guys that you can rotate out, that's good enough. And I like Jared Cook quite a bit this week. And it's just that high over and under Sunday Night Football, Raiders, and just, I'm going to have some Jared Cook exposure. I mean, if you wanted to go lower and you wanted to go a little crazy, you can go Zach Miller. I mean, Zach Miller tied Gronk for the 5th most target among tight ends through 2 weeks. And Chicago offense, I don't know if anybody knows, but right now they have, basically high school players playing for the wide receiver role trying out for the Chicago Bears. I swear, man, they don't have anybody to throw at. And Chicago has thrown 17 of their last 20 plays with a quarter of those passes targeted to Miller. So Mike Glennon sucks. I'm just going to say that, but he can at least throw it to the tight end. So, yeah.
I don't think you heard Gerson, but their superstar all-pro receivers coming back this week, and that's Marcus Wheaton. he'll be on the field this week.
That revenge game.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, can I mention one tight end on FanDuel here real quick?
Go ahead.
Again, I do not play FanDuel, but this popped up on my radar, so I wanted to mention it. One guy I think is completely GPP only as a punt at tight end. They're going to be behind all game, so I think that he could get a decent target share. And they had pretty good chemistry in the preseason. Is going to be Austin Seferian-Jenkins. He's min-priced on FanDuel at 4,500. So I think that if you're looking, like he said, 52, 5,300, it's kind of that sweet spot on FanDuel. But if you do have a lineup you really like and you need to save that $700 or $800, ASJ could be a good punt option, I think, on FanDuel.
Definitely. And there's just one more guy. I know we've pretty much mentioned every damn tight end on this slate, but keep an eye on Jordan Reed. If Jordan Reed is out, I think Vernon Davis is in a good spot as well. I think he had some pretty good games last year. Again, with that high over-under that Gerson keeps mentioning, I think Vernon Davis could be good. If Jordan Reed is out, if he's in any capacity, then don't use Vernon Davis. But if Reed is out, you can plug in Vernon Davis as a very cheap tight end on both sites. All right, we're going to skip over kicker because, we don't do kickers at goingfor2.com, and DraftKings has it right because they don't have kickers on their site. We'll go straight over to the defense here. All right, so before we get to the defenses that we like, I wanted to ask you your both opinion on this and how you do defenses. Do you typically pay up for defenses, or do you like to pay down, or is it sort of a mix depending on the week? Gerson, we'll go to you first.
I have very basic rules on defense. Just pay down against if they have a quarterback that throws a lot of picks and an offense that allows a lot of sacks. Because that's what we're looking for. Possible pick six and those sack points that we can get. But if it's like a chalk defense, because we know those chalk defense like the Denver Broncos, the Seattle Seahawks, they can force a lot of turnovers at home, then you want to pay up for them. But on this specific week, it's very tricky. But you have to, my rule is get sacked, get the interception, positive game script at home. It's just a very volatile position. And if you're going to be spending for defense, those defense get expensive. 5,200 might not seem like a lot of money, but for a defense that only can get you like 5 to 10 points, I mean, if you're lucky, the first week of the season was awesome because you had like 4 defense that got you 20 points. So everybody was like, oh, cool, I'll pay up, Then in the second week, what happened? You didn't get that many points from a top-tier defense, and now we're on week 3, so everything's going to be kind of balanced. But those are my basic rules. It depends. Like right now, I'll say it when we go through defense, but yeah, it's just those are my basic rules.
All right, what about you, Tim? What's your strategy on defenses?
Yeah, I agree with Gerson. Very rarely will you ever see me pick a defense that is not the favorite. So I almost always target favorites. I almost always target guys at home. Like he said, guys that good pressure on the quarterback. I don't tend to target teams that primarily run the ball because they tend to get less turnovers. And like he said, you're going to get some sacks. You may get a fumble or an interception, but you really get those big points on the touchdowns. So unless I see a spot where a quarterback, gets subbed out last minute, or there's a major injury that I think could cause a, higher chance at a touchdown, chances are I'm going to, try and target low scoring games where the team's favored at home.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, I just want to get y'all opinion on that because I had a guy asking me about it earlier about how to pick defenses, and do you just go with the best defense, which a lot of times isn't the way you want to go, because sometimes you got defenses that don't allow teams to score, but they don't get turnovers, and they don't get a lot of sacks either. I think if you look back at some of the greatest defenses of all time, some of those are just defenses that just hold them out of the end zone. And in fantasy, you want to get teams that that get the sacks and get the turnovers. I think right now, Buffalo Bills is one of those where they're not really a great team, but that defense has put up a ton of points fantasy-wise because they're getting a ton of sacks. I'm just pulling their stats up now. Yeah, they had, let's see where this is. They had 6 sacks last week against Carolina. So, yeah, they weren't a great, defense per se because they did get beat, but they had 6 sacks. So it kind of made up for the points they allowed. So case in point with the Buffalo Bills. All right, with that said, Gerson, we'll go back to you on FanDuel. Give me the 3 or 4 defenses you're looking at. We won't go tiers because it's so close in pricing. We'll just give you the top 3 or 4 defenses you like this week.
I say my number 1 defense this week is just going to be – I feel weird saying this too, but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus Minnesota, with Case Keenum there. I saw last week how bad he did, and I know they're at home. That is the downside. Not Tampa Bay, but Minnesota's at home. But they're 4,600 on FanDuel, and I have them projected for about 8 to 8.5 points. So, I mean, Case Keenum is not that great of a quarterback. And Tampa Bay, we saw what they did against Mike Glennon. That could be a repeat. And then after that, I have the Philadelphia Eagles. Fun fact here, just a fun fact, but the Giants have just as many points through 2 games as they do as Odell Beckham's jersey number. So I'm just saying, the Giants are pretty horrible, and that Philadelphia Eagles game at home at 4,500, I think that's going to be a very good play. And it just like I said, I don't really pay up for defense. I mean, I know everybody's going to be on New England Patriots, but I just don't have the confidence that they'll get. I don't know. The 4,900. They can get 10 points, but I'd rather just save. And like I said, a lot of good players and a lot of good position. And I think so. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Philadelphia Eagles. And then after that, if I were to have a chalk defense, I'm going to go to Miami Dolphins. I know they're on the road, but, everybody's going to be on Miami Dolphins because they see the New York Jets. But, you can go with them. But, I'm going to get a little crazy, but I actually like Green Bay Packers defense this week.
Yeah.
So take out Miami Dolphins defense. I'll pick Green Bay, Tampa Bay, and Philadelphia Eagles defense as my top 3 defense.
All right, good deal. Tim, who you got for your defenses over on DraftKings?
Yeah, I think if it was a different week, I would be very high on the Baltimore Ravens. I think that anytime they play Blake Bortles, there's a high chance of a turnover. They get pretty good pressure on the quarterback. But I think, like I mentioned earlier, this is a week you're going to want to save a little bit. So the two highest defenses that I probably will have in terms of exposure are going to be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Philadelphia Eagles for the reasons Gerson mentioned a minute ago. One of them, you get a backup quarterback, and the other one has probably the worst or one of the worst offensive lines. They're just bleeding sacks so far this season. So the Ravens are obviously on the road, and so is Tampa Bay, but Philly is at home. So I might give them a slight edge, but I also think they'll be slightly higher owned. I also completely agree with Gerson with how much we anticipate Andy Dalton is going to be throwing in this game and how many picks he's already thrown. I think that the Packers have to be in consideration for you. And then the last one I'm going to mention here is if you're trying to get a little bit more salary relief, we've mentioned a couple times, Drew Brees, notoriously bad on the road, down at 2,600, you can get the Carolina Panthers. So if I was going to, I'm going to have a little bit of exposure to them just so because of that savings may help me pay up for an extra guy in one of my lineups.
Nice. I'm trying to find where the Panthers at on FanDuel here because I actually didn't even think about them. Yeah, they're kind of middle of the pack there at 4,500. So that's actually a really good price for DraftKings. That's a good call. I actually didn't even notice them over there. They're pretty cheap over on DraftKings. So yeah, Panthers is definitely a good call. Just to be different, I'm going to give a different defense that we haven't talked about yet. And it's a pay up defense. They're 5,000 on FanDuel. That's the Pittsburgh Steelers going to Chicago. We've already mentioned how bad Chicago is. They have no receivers. Jordan Howard's banged up. Who knows how effective he's going to be. They had that week 1 where they had a ton of points put up on the Cleveland Browns. They had 7 sacks, an interception, and a touchdown. Last week against Minnesota, they weren't as good, but they still had 2 sacks, a fumble recovery. So I think the Steelers could definitely be good going up against that pretty awful Bears offense. So I think if you're going to pay up, I think Steelers, and then as Gerson mentioned before, the Dolphins against the Jets, who are pretty terrible. So yeah, I like all those calls at defense. All right.
Can I mention something?
Yep, go ahead.
I really think this week is the week where you don't pay up for defense. I just don't see Miami getting a ton of interceptions or sacks. They're just not really a turnover team. I don't mind that Steelers call. The Steelers are 7.5 favorite. The Bears, well, we know Mike Glennon just sucks. I don't know why you would sign that quarterback for that much money.
And then draft another quarterback in the first round. It makes no sense to me.
No. Trade up and then draft.
Yeah, trade up one spot.
Stupid. One spot. Ooh, 49ers are going to take a quarterback, even though they're just Ben Brown and Hoyer and what's his name, the head, not the head coach because he wasn't a head coach at the time, but
Shanahan
said that he had confidence. Yeah, he GM. Sorry, my bad. But I have a strong feeling, and it's just a gut call. I think this is the week that it's going to be all about value defense. And I have one question for Tim though. This is my GPP leverage play for defense, but I think the New Orleans Saints at 2,000 on DraftKings are worth a shot. If you don't want to pay up on DraftKings, I think first Cam Newton, and they've been doing pretty bad. They have a shot to force some turnovers for $2,000, and I don't know. I just feel like the Carolina Panthers offense is out of sync.
I want
to
add this disclaimer for all the listeners out there. Before we started the podcast, Gerson told us he was sick. So obviously through the course of this podcast, he's probably gone a little cuckoo because I don't know of anybody that wants to call out the Saints. But hey, you know what? You're right about that. They could definitely get a few turnovers here and there, but I can't imagine the Saints is on anybody's radar. So if you took the Saints, you're probably in the 0.01% of them.
I agree. I don't see a situation. Yeah, I don't see a situation where I try and save the extra 600 over taking the Panthers and further pay down. But like he said, if it's a situation where I have a lineup that I absolutely love, I would prefer them to the Jets if we're being honest here. But I don't see a situation where I'm going to be playing the Saints on the road. I just don't see it.
All right, Gerson.
It's a cuckoo call, I guess.
Yeah, Gerson has lost his mind, guys. We'll blame it on the flu. So when the Saints give up 47 points and don't get any turnovers and no sacks, we can just blame it on the flu for Gerson. All right, that wraps up the slate. I just want to thank you both again for coming on such short notice. I know I just told you all about this a few hours ago, so glad to get you both on. Got some good notes, some good information. Hopefully the listeners out there will follow some of our information and make some good lineups this weekend. And good luck to both of you as well.
You too, sir. Always appreciate hopping on with you anytime.
And Gerson, hope you feel better, man.
Lambert.
Hope you feel better, Gerson.
Hey.
Oh yeah, and go Pat, go baby.
All right, guys.
Raider Nation.